Hi, Morage. You can introduce Victor. You're now live.
Oh, okay, thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. I hope you're having a lovely morning, top of the morning, actually. So, welcome to the African STEM Summit. This is a 3-day event, and I believe you had the first day yesterday. I hope it was as engaging as I hope this one is going to be. And we hope that as we venture into the world of cybersecurity, I hope this is the best platform where you get to even, engage with the speaker for the day, and you get to gain even a more better perspective and interest. So this is a 3-day summit. It's curated to inspire, mentor, guide, and expose individuals to the technical skills which they need at every level. That's from junior to intermediate to even senior level. So the goal is to bridge skills and gender gap in STEM, as you've seen in the sponsor is the African STEM Girl. So we are going to share the LinkedIn link of our speaker for today, who is Victor Muriithi. Victor Muriithi is a renowned technologist and a former alumni at Multimedia University, where he did his undergraduate in computer science between, I think, 2016 and 17, 20, up to 2016, where he graduated. And since 2017, he has been a technologist at Multimedia University full time. He has also worked with Huawei program, and he's also a renowned, he has taken very many certifications. I think when you interact with his LinkedIn portfolio, you will get to see the kind of experience we are bringing to the table and the kind of expertise we promise you every time such an event is being organized. So without further ado, I think I will welcome Victor Muriithi to start his presentation. Thank you, and I hope you continue enjoying. If you have any question, kindly chat on the chat on YouTube. You can also follow us and tell a friend to tell a friend to join us, because this is going to be a very joyous and engaging session. So thank you so much for joining in. I will take it now to Victor. Thank you.
Um, Thank you, Morage and Africa Summit team for giving me this opportunity to talk to everyone about web security. Um, so today we're going to be talking about brute forcing, but in particular attacking and defending web applications. But before we do that, just do brief about who I am. My name is Victor Muriithi, as you've been told. I have a little bit of experience in cybersecurity. I've been an instructor, technologist. I wear very many different hats. So today I'm wearing the ethical hacker hat for today, and I hope you're really going to enjoy our session. I have a couple of certifications: certified ethical hacker, HCIA security, etc., etc. And I also enjoy playing CTF. So if you do so, please hit me up, and we can always hit a program or two. Right, so let's start on today's topic. So web applications are very, very prevalent in today's world. I think we all interact with them on a day-to-day basis, and securing these web applications is something that is very, very pertinent to us. And as we've seen over the years, the digital landscape has been changing. You can see the number of threats continuously becoming more and more sophisticated. And not surprisingly, the web is usually it's one of the assets that we have that have the largest attack surface. So getting a good understanding of what you need to do, doing comprehensive threat modeling for your different use cases, your different industries is going to be very, very important. So today I'm going to be focusing mostly on brute forcing. We're going to be looking at what is brute forcing. We're going to be seeing why we do it. We're going to see a brief overview of how attackers generally do it. And then we're going to jump into the fun part, the technical part, which I know most of you are here for. So stay tuned for that. And then once we demonstrate how attackers do it, I'm then going to turn around and look at the defensive options. We're going to look at the different ways we can mitigate this kind of attacks so that we can get a full cybersecurity view of this particular vulnerability class. So we're going to have something for the red teamers, and we're going to have something for the blue teamers, and I hope everyone is going to enjoy it. All right, so as I mentioned, there are so many vulnerabilities that are out there. For example, if we look at the OWASP, which is the Open Web Application Security project, which kind of looks at what are the most common vulnerabilities that are found in web applications. So we have things like SQL injection, cross-site scripting, IDOS, SSRS. I mean, the list goes on, and that's just the top 10. And there's so many other obscure vulnerabilities out there that many people don't know about. Um, so there's so many of them, and we really need to have a good understanding as developers, as security practitioners, so that we can protect our information assets. So what is the impact of brute force? So brute forcing, basically, we are trying to guess as many credentials as possible within a short period of time. And what is the impact of this brute forcing? So this could lead to data breaches, account takeovers, and complete system compromise, right? So this is why this is so important for us to do this. And I know most of us are junior developers in the audience. And I just want to tell you, you're growing in your career. And as you start creating more applications and deploying them in the wild, you're going to experience this. And unfortunately, in the world that we live today, that is a reality that we all have to contend when you're deploying resources in the wild. You will get brute force attempts, whether you want to admit it or not. And for the experienced web managers, web masters in the audience, they will tell you they experience this on a day-to-day basis. So understanding this is going to be very, very important. For our technical session, we're going to be using an application called the Down Vulnerable Web Application. So what is this? So this is an intentionally insecure web application that serves as a valuable tool for us security professionals to learn, play, practice with vulnerabilities in a safe and ethical manner. So we're going to be doing that. I'm going to show you how to set it up very easily. It's going to be super, super easy. We're going to have it up and running in less than 30 minutes, actually less than 10. And then we're going to see how we're going to see how it works, how it's structured. We're going to play around with it. We're going to attack it, and then we're going to see what are the security mechanisms that have been shown to mitigate this kind of attack. So let's have that basic overview of how these attacks are. So let's just start by defining it. A brute force attack is a trial and error method of attempting to guess login credentials, encryption keys, and other sensitive information by systematically trying all possible combinations until the correct one is found. So again, this doesn't just apply to web applications. It also applies to cryptanalysis, where we're trying to break down the common cryptographic technologies that have been put in place. So an attacker may get your plain text and maybe has some knowledge about the algorithm that you've implemented. And using that information, they can try and brute force your cryptographic security, right? For example, another variation of this kind of attack is what we call credential stuffing. So what credential stuffing is attackers will go and get credentials from known breaches. So for example, there's a very common site that is out there, it's called Have I Been Pwned? So you can always check it out. So this is a database that contains publicly available databases of credentials that have been leaked by threat actors in the wild. And these credentials can also be found in like places in the dark web, and security breaches and data breaches are really becoming often, and they're out there. And if you do a search, you will find these credentials out there. So that's just another variation of this kind of attack. So they will get these credentials and then they try and use them in all these different online presences that we have, including our social media accounts, our business email applications, um, and all other different types of applications that we interact with on a day-to-day basis, right? Another type of brute forcing that we're going to be looking at is directory brute forcing, right? And the idea here is when you're developing your application, you have different directories that hold different types of application. So I can have like a folder called source. I can have another one called assets, where I hold all my common static assets. So here the attacker will use a known word list containing all the mostly common um, paths that are available, and then just go and try one at a time. And the idea here is we're trying to discover all these hidden directories that the normal user might not be, does not usually interact with, because the normal user is just going to be clicking on the links that you provided on your front end, right? But in this case, I'll try and check and see what are the hidden directories that you can have there. And I want to tell you that this is something that I have actually been able to find in the wild. A common mistake that I see a lot of developers have is when they go and they deploy the application, right? And then once they've done that, part of their normal operations and maintenance is they will go and create a backup of their website. And for some reason, I see this a lot. Developers just leave that backup on your application and just forget about it. So attackers just need to go and download, do the directory brute forcing, discover that you have your backup there, and boom, they have your entire source code, they have your login credentials, they have sensitive database URLs and configuration parameters, and it's basically game over from there. So this is a very, very important thing that we really need to be conscious of as we develop our applications, as we maintain our applications, right? So how do they do this? So basically we use automated tools, right, to generate and test a large number of inputs, such as username and passwords, and we direct all those towards a particular target. And we're going to see how this works in practice. So that's just basically an overview of how this works. So for our demonstration today, we're going to be using Docker. Um, so for those who might not be familiar with Docker, so Docker is a very popular containerization platform that allows you for easy deployment and management of applications. So for the developers in the house, I know you know what this is. For those who are not very, very familiar with what this is, basically this is a type of operating system abstraction and virtualization. So in the early days of virtualization, we used to have hypervisors, right? Things like VMware, ESXi, VirtualBox, etc., etc. Right? So in that scenario, you'd have like a hypervisor, which would virtualize the operating system, or rather, it will give you a platform for where you could host additional guest operating systems. But the drawback was it was very computationally expensive to host this kind of heavy virtual machines. They're still in use today. There are different application scenarios where you might want to do that. But for the sake of development, we got to another technology called Docker. And the main inspiration behind Docker was, I don't know if you guys have had that problem where you've written your application and like on your laptop and everything is fine and dandy. But when you go and deploy it on some server somewhere, uh, everybody's complaining that it's not working, but on your end is working. So that was like really what was the background and what motivated the development of Docker. So the idea is you're going to write your application, whatever it is, and then once you Dockerize it, it's going to contain all the necessary dependencies that are needed to run that application. And then I can take this container and I can run it virtually anywhere, right? And that is really the beauty of Docker. Another motivation of why you might want to invest time learning and how Docker works is right now we've seen the proliferation and the adoption of cloud technologies, right? We have the AWSs, the Azures, um, OpenShift from Red Hat, right? So a lot of companies, a lot of organizations are adopting the cloud, and you'll find that Docker and the associated technologies like Kubernetes are very, very native to the cloud. And this basically gives you the power to automatically scale either upwards or inwards, depending on your use case. So when the demand of your application grows, Docker and all these other containerization or container orchestration technologies are able to scale based on the demand, right? So that was a very, very quick rundown of why we're going to use it and why it's important. So we're going to use this platform to host our down vulnerable application. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to go to a site called Docker Hub. I'm going to be showing you that in a few. So Docker Hub is this repository where we can have these, what we call Docker images. So what is a Docker image? So Docker image is just a collection of all the files that make up a particular application that you want to run, right? So in this case, we want to run the down vulnerable web application, and it's going to be in the form of an image. And this image is what is going to be hosted on this repository. So Docker Hub is a collection of so many different types of images, and I highly, highly encourage you when you have some time, just go and browse and see all the amazing things that you have there. Another good thing about Docker is it completely eliminates some cumbersome configuration that you usually need to have when you're setting up your development environment. So on the on the left here, you can see the tech stack that I have. So the container here is going to have Ubuntu. So I'm going to have an Ubuntu operating system. And then for the backend, I'm going to be using PHP to run the application. And then the database is just going to be MySQL in this case. Right, so it's going to bundle up all that together in the form of a container, and then we can run it basically anywhere. And the beauty about this is it's very lightweight and very easy to set up. And we're going to see that in a minute. Right, so that is going to be our platform. So once we do that, so basically the step is going to be, we're going to pull the Docker image, right? So once we have the image, in that format is just, it's in a static format. What we are going to do is then we're going to make an instance of that image. And this instance of this image is what we're going to call a container, right? So you can have one image, and then you have the ability to spin up multiple containers. And that is the beauty of Docker. Don't worry if that sounds like a lot of gibberish. I'm going to be showing you all of this practically. And another sort of motivation of why you want to do this is because we want to do this in a safe and controlled environment. I am an ethical hacker, and I believe that all of us who are watching this are aspiring to be ethical hackers, right? We don't want to go and attack assets that we don't control, because that's very, very illegal. Right? So please, please make sure that whatever you're going to teach, you're going to be learning here today, use that ethically. There's a huge demand for ethical hackers. So many organizations need people who are able to audit applications. So please, let's stay on the right track, right? So we're going to use this environment locally, And the best part about this is that this is completely free, right? I'm not going to show you any tools that require you to purchase anything. So if you're a student and you're watching this, yeah, know that you can practice all these things in a safe, legal environment, which is free. That's the beauty of open source. All right, so this is just basically what we're going to be doing. So we're going to navigate to the page, and then we're going to see the different challenge categories that it has. And then we're going to configure the attack. And then we're going to be analyzing the results as we go along. And I'm going to be making a lot of mistakes along the way, and I'll be doing that on purpose so that you see that this is not just the way they show in the movies where you just go, a hacker goes, just types in random characters, 5 seconds, and they're in. No, that only happens in the movies. Right? In real practice, there's a lot of trial and error. You're going to run into a lot of issues, and I'm going to show you how you're going to analyze them critically and how you're going to solve them. And I hope that is going to be very valuable for you so that we can see the process. So even the best hackers, in my opinion, go through those challenges, and what they're trying to do is they're going to build your critical thinking skills, which are very, very important in this field. Having be able to have that curious mindset, right? So you go and do something, and you always need to ask yourself, what could go wrong here? So what if I try this? What will the application do if I try that? So that's basically the attacker mindset. And I hope by the end of this session, you're going to have that mindset. You're going to start harnessing it and developing it, because it's going to be very, very important throughout your career. All right, so enough talking. I think it's time for um, uh, the live stuff. So here I just have my Kali instance, and we're going to do everything from scratch. So don't worry. So in your environment, I hope you have your terminals up and ready. So if you're following along, this is the time. Get your keyboards out, stretch, and get comfortable. Get your coffee, get your water, and let's get it ready. So what tools are we going to be using today? We're going to be using a couple of tools. Just write this down here. So obviously, I'm using a virtual machine. In this case, I'm just virtual box. So if you're wondering what is my setup, I'm just using VirtualBox. So my OS, this is Kali, nothing too crazy. We're going to be using Docker. I'm going to show you how we're going to install this. And then we're going to use Bubsuit. This already comes with Kali, so if you have Kali, you don't need to install this. And then we're going to use some automated tooling. I'm going to be showing you tools like WFuzz, FAF, and a couple of others. And then we're going to use a word list. So here I'm just going to use cyclists, right? So this is all you're going to need. Oh, and just one more thing. I'm going to be using a couple of browser extensions. I'm going to be using Foxy Proxy and Cookie Editor. So this is all I'm going to be using for this demonstration. Again, everything here is free. But and if I make such typos, please let me know in the comments. Yeah, so this is basically what I'm going to be using for my setup, right? And if you have any questions, please feel free to post them in the group. Stop me at any time if I'm going too fast or you want me to explain something. Right. So the first thing is you want to make sure that your machine is up to date. So you're gonna run this. So what this command is going to do is going to make sure that your repositories are up to date. Right? So make sure you run that. I'm not going to run this because I already did it. This is not something that you should do it right now. I'm hoping that your machine is already up to date. So once it's up to date, the next thing we want to do is we want to install Docker, right? So if I come here, I already have Docker open, so we can come here. This is the site. You can learn about it. This is the site, just docker.com. You can see we talk about what it is. You can see how popular it is. For this case, you can always check depending on the operating system that you're currently using. Just go here in the docs and you're going to see how it works. But in my case, I'm using a Debian distro, in particular Kali, so it's already in my repositories. And to confirm that, I can just do sudo apt search docker io. So do that again. Right, so this is the package that you want, docker.io, right? So make sure you have that by just running sudo apt install docker.io. Very, very simple. Again, I'm not going to run this because I have already done it. But the first time, if this is your first time, you really want to do this, and you're just going to run this once. Okay. To confirm that everything is running well, you can just do sudo dpkg -l to grep for docker. You can see I already have it running. So this is just going to list my installed packages, and then I'm just searching for Docker. And then to confirm that it is running, I can just do Docker version like that. So if once you get some output like this, you know you have your Docker successfully running. So I'm just going to give you guys a couple of minutes to do that, and it shouldn't take too long. Shouldn't take too long. So once that's done, normally Docker requires some administrative permissions. So there are two ways about going about it. So you can either use sudo before the main Docker command, but if you don't do that, you can add your current user to the Docker group. So if I cut, let's see, groups, so you can see all the different groups that are there. And at the bottom here, I don't know if you guys can see, there's this group here. So you just want to add your current user to that group. And the way you do that is just sudo user mod and then AG. So this is going to add this current user, give the user, and then so in this case, whatever the user is. So in this case, I was just using in this case, for me, this is Victor, but whatever your username is, and then the name of the group, which is Docker, like that. So that's going to add your current user to that group so that you can just use Docker without using sudo. But for my case, I'm just going to do that the previous way using sudo. So both ways work. The next thing that we're going to do is we want to create a Docker network, right? So by default, once you install Docker, it comes with its own network. So if I just do ifconfig here, you can see here that I have an interface called Docker 0 here. So these are all my interfaces. This is just localhost here. This is my Ethernet adapter. And then here, you can see once I install it, it creates its own interface, and you can see it is in the range of, sorry about that. We can see that it's in this network range 172.16.0.0, right? It's in that, and this is the subnet, right? But since we are working with an intentionally vulnerable application, right, we might want to separate our instances or our containers so that they don't really interfere with maybe other containers that you might be wanting to run in future, right? So to do that, we're going to use the command sudo docker network create, and then here we want to give it the name of the network. So in this case, I call mine down vulnerable web app network. So that way I can know, okay, so this is a network that I want to deploy my container to, right? So run this command. I'm not going to run it because I already did it. And if for me to look at the network, so I can just do sudo docker network ls, right? And you can see these are the networks that are there. Right? So this is the default one that is there. And then once you create your network, it's going to show up like this. So this is the network that I just created, and I'm going to deploy my container here. And the way it works, you can see it has an ID, the name, and the driver, and the scope. And we can also look at each of these in depth. You can see how they work. So we can do sudo docker. We can do network. We can do, I think, is it bridge inspect. It's the other way around. Inspect. I'm going to look at the first one, which is a bridge. Yeah, so you can see this is how it looks like. This is the name. This is the ID. You can see when this was created. And this is the important stuff here. So you can see this is the network range that is created by default. I didn't create this. So next, let's look at the one that I just created, this damn vulnerable network, so we can see how it looks like. Close this. So I'm going to run the same command, but here I'm going to change this to damn vulnerable web app network, like that. Right, and you can see I've created a different one. The previous one was 172.17, and this is 18. Right. Docker networks are very, very powerful. I don't have the time to go so much in depth about it, but when you have the time, please look into them. They are very, very versatile, and you can really do a lot of amazing stuff with them. Right? So make sure you create your network, and then next we want to get our image. So you can go to Docker Hub. So you can easily go to dockerhub.com and search for dump vulnerable. So you can just go here to your browser and search for Docker Hub down vulnerable web app. So this is the first thing that's going to come up, and I've already opened it here, and this is it, right? So like I mentioned, Docker Hub is a very, very great place. It's a nice repository that has a bunch of interesting, I don't any cookies. Yeah, so you can see all these different images that are there, and there are just a bunch of them. So for example, here, these are AI related ones you can play around with. You can see which ones are trending, and the repository is always growing. You can see this one for MySQL, Postgres, etc., etc. So if you're a developer, please invest some time to learn this. It will definitely be worth it, right? And even if you're developing your own custom images, you can also create an account on Docker Hub, and then you can host your your images once you've created them here. And then you can go on and deploy them. So for example, I know um, uh, Azure Cloud, all the major cloud providers, they have their own container repositories. And this is another way that you can also host. You can also use them here for that particular purpose. But let's go back to our application today. And getting this up and running is very, very simple. So at the right here, there's this command, and this is what we're going to do. So we're just going to copy this, and then I'm just going to prepare that, and then this is what you want to do. So you're going to run this command, docker pull, and then the name of the container. Again, I'm not going to run this because I've already run it, but it will take a couple of MBs depending on, shouldn't take too long, but just a couple of MBs, again, dependent on your internet speeds. So once you have it running, you can just do Docker images, and you can see this is how it looks like. So I already got my image. You can see it's 712 megabytes, and you can see where it was created, and you can see the image. Now, once we have this, the next thing is we want to do is run the container. So maybe I can give you a couple of minutes to make sure that this is done. So I don't know if there are any questions so far. It's going to check the chat. No questions so far. Great. Again, guys, if you have any questions, feel free, drop them in the chat, and I'll try to answer them best of my ability. Right, so once you do that, the next thing is we want to now, we're going to run the container, right? So what have we done so far, right? Let's clear this for now, or let's keep it there. So first, so installation steps. So what did we do here? So we installed Docker, right? And then we created a Docker network, right? And then we pulled the down vulnerable web app from the Docker. Right. And then now what we want to do now is to create the container. From the image. Right. So this is a basic rundown of what we've done so far. Right. Right. So let's do that. So let's see how we're going to do this. So once you have our image, you can easily run the container using the command so docker sudo docker. Let's clear this. Sudo docker run. Then we want to give it a name. I'm just going to call this down vulnerable web app container, right? And then specify the -d option. And what this basically means is I'm going to deploy this application in detached mode. And that means it's going to run as a background service, right? And then I'm going to specify the ports that I'm going to listen to, 8080. Now, I think it's very important that I explain what this is doing. So what is going to happen here is once this Docker container is created, it's going to listen on port 80. So this second 80 here, and then it's going to expose port 80 on my machine, right? So it's very important that you understand the difference here. So before I run this, I can just show you. So SS, you can see that I don't have port 80 running. right now. Okay, but in a minute after I spin up this container, it's going to expose port 80, and then all my traffic is going to first go through my machine on port 80, and then it's going to be forwarded on the Docker network to this container on port 80, on the second 80. So the first 80 here, this is my local host, and then this is 80 on the container machine. Right, I hope that makes sense. And then I'm going to specify the network that I want to deploy this to, right? So remember in our previous step where we created the network. So here, this is where we're going to specify it. So we called it downloadable web app network, like that. And then lastly, we want to give the name of the image, right? So it was called vulnerables slash web DVA, right? I think that was the name. Let's do sudo docker images. Yeah, that's the name of the container. So you want to make sure that it matches with this last parameter here. So again, this is the command sudo docker run. Give it the container name. Specify this is going to run in the background using the -d option. Specify the ports. I'm going to listen on my local host on port 80, and then I'm going to forward all my traffic to the container on port 80. This is the network I want it to be on. And then this is the name of the image. It's going to take a couple of seconds to spin this up, and then now we should have our container. So to check our running containers, I can do the command sudo docker ps. You can see that now we have the image. You can see it's running. It's created 15 seconds, and it started its up. And you can see here it's listening on all interfaces of 80, and then it's going to forward it to 80. And then this is it. So coming back here, I can run this same command. Sorry, not this one. I want to check. So here you can see previously port 80 wasn't running. So if I can run the same command, you see that now port 80 is exposed on my computer. And congratulations, you've set up downloadable web app. How easy was that? Right? Super, super easy. So let's confirm this is running. So I'm going to go to my browser. I'm going to open up machine. So I'm just need to go to localhost, like that. Boom, and that's it. We have our application up and running. How easy was that? Right. So if you've been developing for a while and you've been here for a couple of years like me, before even Docker, you know how painful it was setting up the LAMP stack. So in just a couple of commands, we have everything up and running. Now, before we continue, I just want to read this page, see whether we can get some good information. So the most important thing here to note is that for the CTF players, there is a way for you to deploy this for your own use cases. So that's something that you probably want to check out. And then, so this is just talking about how to set it up. I think you've already done that. Another thing is there are a couple of flags that are hidden in this application, and my challenge is for you is go and find them. The most important thing here is the setup. So again, these are the credentials. So initially when you set up, this would be the password. So the credentials currently are admin and password. So please take note of that. We're going to be using that throughout our session today. So we can come here and try this. So I'm just going to admin password. Right, so we can see here we've logged in. And the first time you run this, it's going to tell you to set up the database. So remember in our earlier discussion, we saw that it's using MySQL for the backend. So what you just need to do is come and click this button here at the bottom, say create slash reset the database. You're just going to do this for the first time. So it's going to take a few seconds, and once it does that, it's going to log you out. Then you're going to have to log in again. So I'm just going to do this again. So admin password. Perfect. And here we are, guys. Welcome to the Down Vulnerable Web application. So you can see the brief demonstration of how basically a walkthrough of what it is. So you can see here, this is a PHP, my SQL web application, which is down vulnerable. Its main goal is to aid security professionals, etc., etc. So generally, the way it works here is on the left here, you can see we have a bunch of categories. So we have brute force, we have command injection, you have CSRF, cross-site request forgery, file inclusion, file upload, insecure capture, SQL injection, weak session IDs, XSS, CSP bypass, right? So a bunch of great stuff that you can play around with. If you read the documentation on their GitHub page, they tell you that there are a lot of, okay, these are the official vulnerabilities, but there are others that are hidden. So my challenge to you is see whether you can find other vulnerabilities that are not really shown here. That should be a fun exercise for you, right? So what we're going to be focusing on here is on the main brute force challenge here. But before I do that, I just want to show you about the down vulnerable security option. So when I click here, we'll see that the way this application is set up is that we have different security levels, okay? And every security level is going to correspond to the defenses that have been put in place, right? So we can see here we have 4 levels. So we're going to start off with low. So here at low, this has no security measures at all, right? So this is no security at all. We're going to see why that's very dangerous. And we're going to see how that looks like. And then as we progress, we're going to go to the medium. So here we have some sort of security, but we have a lot of bad practices here still. And then we're going to go to high. So here has pretty good security. It's going to be hard for script kiddies to get past this. And then we have impossible. So this is going to be secure against all vulnerabilities, right? So I hope now you can see why this application is very good, because not only are you looking at how you're going to attack applications, but we're going to see what are the security mitigation strategies that have been put in place rather. So probably at the end, I'm going to show you even some source code and see how this is actually implemented. Right. So obviously we're going to start off with low by default. Super easy, so that even the most beginner of beginners will be comfortable with this, and then we're going to slowly work our way to the top. Right. So once we set up our security, the next thing is just going to go to this section here, and this is what we're going to be attacking, this login page, right? So in your mind, in the real world, you can think of this as like an admin portal for some web application that you've been hired to test. In this case, right? So before we start attacking this, we need to set up our environment, right? So on the left here, you can see I have a couple of browser extensions. So what you want to do is you want to come here, and so if you're on Firefox, this is just as easy as Control A, Control Shift A. No, it's not that. Let me see. So you want to go to tools, extensions for developers. So what you want to do here is you want to go and look for a couple of extensions. Remember here we talked about Foxy Proxy and Cookie Editor, right? So you want to come here and search for Foxy Proxy standard. So this is the one you want. So basically what we're going to be doing here is for us to implement our attacks, we're going to have to implement a proxy, right? So we're going to be intercepting a request, you play around with it, and then forward it to the application. And for us to do that, we have to set up our proxy, and the proxy is going to just be a middleman between the web application and you as the attacker, right? So we're going to see why this is going to be so important. So this is going to interact with Babsuit. So we're going to set up the proxy on Babsuit, and then once we configure this, we're going to be able to easily switch our proxy on and off, right? Then the next one we want is cookie editor. So we just come here and search for cookie editor. Yeah, this is the one you want with this icon. Again, this is just going to allow us to play around with our cookies, right? So those are the two main extensions that we're going to use for our browser. So make sure you install those two. It shouldn't take a lot of time. The other thing that we're going to need is we're going to use a word list, right? And a word list is just basically a file that contains all the different words that we're going to be trying when you're doing a brute forcing. So in that case, we're going to have to use something called sec lists. So sec list is a collection of multiple types of security lists. It's pretty huge. I request if you don't have it, please try and install it right now before we start working with it. It's going to be very important. So once you install it, it's going to be installed in the location user share sec lists like that. And it has a bunch of different things here. So we have tools for web discovery. So we're going to be working with that. We have some items. So I can just list some of them. So if I look at, you can see the different types for DNS. So if you want to do some DNS brute forcing or subdomain or virtual host brute forcing, you can see file systems, infrastructure, web content. So we're going to be looking at that. So discovery, web content, and we're going to be using some of this, right? So in our initial step, when we're doing our directory brute forcing, we're going to be using some of this word list, and you can see there are a bunch of them. Another one that we're going to be looking at is passwords, right? So if I go to passwords, again, you can see I have so many different types ones from 10 million to 500, right? And we're going to be using this a small one so that we don't spend too much time. Obviously, the larger the word list, the longer it's going to take to brute force. So again, it's very important that you are careful in deciding, choosing what you're going to be using. That's what we're going to be using for a word list. Yeah, so I think that is going to be our setup. Right, so let's see what we're going to do. So the next thing we're going to be using is Babsuit. I think I've mentioned it. And this is what I want. So in my case, I'm just going to be using the community edition. Again, like I mentioned, this is going to be totally free. We're going to be using the free edition. If you have the professional edition, feel free to use that. Right, so this is how Babsuit is going to be looking like. And the most important thing here is our proxy. So if you look at it by default, it's going to be set to this. If this is your first time running, obviously this is not going to be checked. So you want to make sure that you check this. So you can see by default here, it's going to be running on localhost on port 8080. That is going to be very, very important. So once Babsuit is up and running, now I can go to Foxy Proxy here. And you can see I've already configured an option called BAP, right? And you can see it's going to port 8080. But for the first time, what you want to do here is going to go to options. And okay, so go to proxies, right? So here, so this is what you want to add. So you want to give it a name. So I called mine burp. So, or whatever you want to call it. So I can call this like burp 2 or 3, and then I can click on it. So again, this is the title here, call it burp or whatever, burp 2. And then here you want to specify the type. By default, this is going to be HTTP. It also supports for SOCKS 5 proxy. So if you're setting up something like Chisel and you want to intercept that traffic, this is the option that you're going to go for. But for use case, we're just going to be using this. And then for the host here, we just want to use 127.0.0.1 for localhost. And then the port by default, this is port 8080. So you want to do that, and then you just want to click on save. I'm not going to do that because I already created, but for you, if it's your first time, you want to do that. And the reason why this is important is if I didn't do this, then instead I had to go to settings, scroll down all the way to where we have our network settings, click on network settings, and then configure a proxy manually, right? And if you don't want to use a proxy, then I'd have to come and disable this setting over and over again. So that is kind of the motivation behind using Foxy proxy. And then for the other, extension is cookie editor. And again, this is just going to allow us to view our cookies, and we're going to interact with it later on. Then once you've configured it, as you can see here, it's very easy. You can just turn it on and off, as simple as that. So rather than playing around with your settings, you can easily disable them if you want your traffic to go through Burpsuit or not, right? So for now, it's off, and we are going to play around with that. So once you have up and running, so remember initially we had this was our credentials, admin, and password. So let's just see how that looks like. Close this. Yeah, so I come here. I can try admin and password. And you can see once it's done, once you log in successfully, it's going to give you a message, welcome to the protected area admin, right? So if we try something that doesn't exist, so for example, admin and test, you can see we're going to get the message username and or password is incorrect. So please take note of this. This is going to be important later on, okay? So let's see how this works. So first of all, I'm going to go to Burpsuit, make sure that my proxy has been correctly configured. So again, make sure that this is checked so that it's able to intercept your traffic, right? And then by default here, you can see I have nothing, but once I come here, select this. Now all my traffic should go through Burpsuit, and I can just do a refresh. So once I refresh, and you can see here that these are all the requests that my browser made, and we can see all the requests and play around with the responses here at the bottom. One thing that you always want to do is you want to make sure that you only get traffic that is going towards our application. So we don't want to see anything, for example, that is going to all the other tabs that are open. We just want to focus on our target. Again, we're not attacking anyone else, we're just attacking ourselves. So to do that, we want to add this to scope. So you can right click this and say add to scope, right? And you want to click yes. So what this is going to do, so label this, is going to show us only traffic that is going on to our target. Then the other thing here that you need to do is come to our proxy, go to our history, and then you want to click on this, and you want to show only in scope items. So this is going to filter out anything else. So for example, like I had previously opened Docker Hub, is going to make sure that it's not going to show up in my burp history. So make sure you select that, and click apply. Cool. So once we've done that, we can start playing around with our traffic. So the main one that we want is this here. So right, we can see here that this is the one that has the login. You can see here it's making a GET request, right? And the path is /vulnerabilities brute, and then it's passing the credentials in the form of a URL parameter. So for example, you can see that the username is admin, password is test, and login is equals to login, right? So if you want to play around with this request, we can right click, and these are some of the tools that Bobsuit comes with. So the one that we're going to be playing around with is this two. So intruder and repeater. For now, I'm just going to send it to repeater so that we can see how that request looks like. So this is how the request looks like. And if I want to replay it, I can just send that, and you can see I get a response 200. And if I scroll here to the bottom, you can see the message here, username and or password is incorrect. If I change this here back, change this parameter to password. See if I send that, again, I get a response message 200. And if I scroll to the bottom, you can see, welcome to the password protected area, right? So you can see how Bobsuit is very, very important when you're doing web application auditing, right? Right, so let's play around with this. So I'm just going to go back to my request here, and this time around I'm going to send it to intruder, right? And then at the top here, I'm going to click on intruder, and this is what we want to use to perform our brute forcing. Okay, so here we can see here we have the same request as we saw here in repeater, right? So it's exactly the same thing. And the thing here that we want to do is, number one, we're going to choose what is the attack type. And then we want to tell Bobsuit where exactly we want to brute force, right? In this case, we know that the username is admin, right? And what we want to test is the password field, right? That's the one that we are currently interested in, okay? So what we're going to do is I'm going to select the password here, test, and I'm going to click on add, right? And you can see here that it's selected with this sort of greenish background. So what this basically means is Bobsuit is going to come and check our request, and it's going to look at this this parameter here, and it's going to try different passwords at this section here. Okay, so the other thing that I want to show you is the different types of attacks that you can launch using Bobsuit. I know the font is a little bit small. Please bear with me. So the first one is sniper. And you can see here it says this attack type uses a single set of payloads, one or more payload positions. Each payload, it places each payload into the first position, then each payload into the second position, and so on. Right? So this is where you're just trying to attack maybe one parameter. Then you have the battering ram here. So here, in case we're still going to use one payload, but we're going to place it at different places. So for example, we've had multiple parameters, and we just want to use the same word list. This is the option we're going to go for. The other option is the pitchfork, and I will be demonstrating this one later on. This one is when we have two parameters that we want to brute force. So for example, we have the username field and the password field, right? So we're going to have a separate word list for the user lists, and we're going to have a separate list for the passwords. So what this is going to do is going to take the first entry from our users list and match it with the first entry in our password list, right? And then it's going to go to the second one, match the second entry in our users list, and try and match that with the second entry in our password list. So we're going to do that sequentially until it finds the password. Then next we have the cluster bomb. And this is sort of similar to the previous one, but in this case here, it's going to do all the permutations. So what do I mean by that? So it's going to take a username, for example, admin, and then it's going to try all the passwords in our list. Then it's going to go to the next username, try all of them, go to the third, try all the passwords, right? And yeah, so you can see the different attack scenarios that we can have in this case. But for starters, we're just going to use the sniper attack. And then next is going to tell what are the payloads. So I'm going to click on this payload section here. You can see here that we've only selected one entry, and you can see we can have different types of payloads. We can have numbers, we can have dates, we can have usernames, and I'm going to be showing another type. So in this case, we just want to use a simple list, right? And so this is where we can load our word list. So you just want to click on this, and you can see I've already selected our passwords field. You can see this is in my user share cyclist passwords folder. So the same thing that I showed you earlier. And I'm just going to look for a small password list here. Let me see which one I use. So I'm just going to use this one. So 500 was password list here. And you can see we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and our password here. Password is already there, and there's a bunch of others. And that's all we need to do. And then next we can just click on start attack. So when you first run it, it's going to tell you that the community edition of Babsuit contains, it's just a demo. And for this case, unfortunately, they throttle our requests using the free version rather than the community edition. So that means our responses are going to be very slow. So we can see here all the requests that it was trying. You can see here 1, 2, 3 password. It was trying all of those. You can see the status code. You can see the response that was given and the length. So one of the common things that we like to do is we like to filter based on the length, right? We can see that all these other requests have sort of a smaller length, but one stands out here, which is our password, right? So that is how we can easily determine that this is a correct password. Another way that we can do this is I'm just going to discard this. So I'm just going to go back here in my settings. So one of the things that we can do is instead of filtering based on the response, we can set up a grep match. So what this is going to do is it's going to look for certain keywords in our application. So if we go back to application, remember when you enter the wrong password, this was the message that it gave us, right? Username and or password is incorrect. So we can put this whole word in here. So we can just copy this, go back here. So we just want to remove this, clear. And then we're going to add. Make sure you don't have any spaces. Just paste in like that, and let's click on add. So it's going to go around and look for this. And let's clear this, paste that again. Let's add that, yeah. So it's going to look for this particular text in the response. I'm just going to go back to my option. I'm going to do this again. So I'm going to select this, go to intruder, close this. Again, sorry about that. Target history, intruder. Okay, so again, I'm going to select my payload, click add, make sure again this is sniper, payload simple list. Again, I'm going to use the same word list. And then I'm going to go to my settings, grep match, I'm going to clear this, paste this in. Yeah. And then I'm going to go back here and I just want to start the attack. I'm going to complain. And you can see for all these particular entries, all of them was able to match except 1. And in this case, it is our password, right? So that is how we can easily detect whether we've gotten the correct password or not. Super, super easy. Another thing that we could have done is match on the success message. So those are the two options that we have. We can either filter on the error message or filter on the success message. And both ways we're going to be able to get the correct password. All right, so that is the first method we are going to see. So the next thing is I want to show us how can we do the same thing on the terminal, right? So what I'm going to do is before I do that, I'm just going to go back here and I'm going to log in again. Right. So here we've seen that we have we've logged in. So I'm just going to right click on this image here. And we're going to see something interesting. But before we do that, I just want to take a step back here. And so now we want to start working on the terminal aspect, right? So we've seen how that looks like using Babsuit. So how can you achieve the same thing on the terminal? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to make a directory here. I'm just going to call this Summit, right? So in Summit, then I'm going to make a couple of directories here. It's going to be for my scans, and we're going to create the others as we continue. So one of the first things that we usually want to do when you get web application is what we call directory brute forcing, right? And again, the idea here is we're trying to discover hidden directories. And for that, we have so many different applications that we can do this with. So the first tool that I'm going to demonstrate here is a tool called search, right? So this is a Python-based application that is able to do exactly this, right? So let's see how it works. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run the tool search, and then I'm going to specify -u. In this case, -u is the URL. So if I look at the help, so search -h, if I scroll here, you can see -u is the URL. So this is what we need to give it to. So in this case, it's just going to be HTTP localhost, like that. So it has its own built-in word list, but you can specify it using the -w option. But in this case, I just want to be super simple. You can see it's going to store in a folder called reports, and you can see all the different things that it's able to find here. And one of the things that I'm going to recommend as you walk through this, it's always good to take notes. So I'm just going to create a file here called notes.txt. And we're going to work with this. So this is going to be downloadable web app. So the IP is going to be localhost. So right now we're just doing some recon. We're just trying to see what is out there. So we can see we got a .ignore file. So here, so the burst directory brute forcing. If I can type, right? So what are the interesting things that we found? So we have a slash git ignore. So that's interesting, right? What else do we have here? So we have a bunch of other things here, but this is 4.3, meaning we can't get them. We have an about, we have a change log. That may be interesting, right? Change logs are always very good. So for example, when you want to know the particular version of the application. What else? We have a config. That's also interesting. We have some docs here, and then the main application is found on slash dumb vulnerable web app. And then we have php.ini. This is also a very interesting application, rather a file. What else? We also have slash robots.txt. Yeah, so that's it. So we can also use the same command, and let's see what it finds when we do slash down vulnerable web app, because that's when the main application is hosted. So let's see what this is going to find. So again, we can see this. You can see this is just a normal JavaScript file. Obviously, in a real world application, you definitely want to look at all these different files and find for interesting things. But in our scenario, we're just going to ignore it for now. So I'm just going to let this run. But I can tell you this is all it's going to find. I don't think it's going to find anything more interesting, just CSS, the usual stuff, some images. Yeah, that's probably it. So that is the first tool. I'm just going to cancel this. Hope you've seen what it's doing. All right, so let's finish that. Another great tool that we need to use whenever we are working with websites is curl, right? And if you want to see the same information, remember when you got here was my repeater. So this is the information that we were getting, and you can see the different type of requests. You can see all the parameters that were here, and we can see the response here. So how can we do this on BAP? So we can use the curl tool, and then I'm going to use this option, so -s. This is going to make sure that it's quiet. V means it's going to be verbose output. We're going to see as much input as we need to see. -L just means we're going to follow redirects. And then we want to give the URL. So in this case, just localhost. Localhost, not localghost. And then we just want to pipe our output to devnull, right? So once I run this, we're going to see the request that's going to be made. So you can see here, you're going to localhost on port 80, and you're issuing just a GET request. And my user agent is curl here. So this is the redirect. So if I didn't have this -L here, this request will have stopped. So what this does is it tells curl, hey, if you see any 302 message, just follow it, right? So we're going to get 302 redirection, and you can see the next location that it wants us to go to is localhost/login. And then finally we get our 200 OK response, and then we get a cookie, right? And this is going to be important later on, because cookies essentially are used to they're used by web servers to know who is currently logged in our application. So this is going to be important later on. So that is how we can interact with the website from the terminal. Okay. Just to show that our container, a little bit information about our container before we continue. So if I do docker ps, I'm just going to use this sudo. We can still interact with this container through the CLI. And the way we can do this is using the following command. So sudo docker exec. So we want to execute some command. And then I'm going to specify -it. This means I'm going to run an interactive terminal. And next thing here is we want to give the container ID, right? So Docker is so nice. It allows us to just do the first three characters, and it's automatically going to know what you're talking about. And then I want to specify that I want just a bash shell, right? So once I do this, you can see that now my prompt has changed, and I'm inside the container. So if you ever wanted to know play around with the container and go inside it, you can see this is just a Ubuntu machine. So I can just do uname -a. So just a generic image that we saw earlier. And the main application is, if we go to /var .html, so this is where the application is, right? So you can see all the files. So this is a robot.txt file that we saw earlier. You can see these are the vulnerabilities, right? This was the main down vulnerable web app. And so this is some of the stuff that we were seeing on when we started running the directory brute forcing, right? And if you want to see, oh, so there's something interesting here called Hackable. I don't think I saw that. So let's just go there. So Hackable. And you can see we have some flags, some interesting stuff here. So let's go to flags. And there's a file here. Interesting. So there's a nice script here that says nice try. Use this file, include next time. And then we have some Easter eggs here, guys. So again, this down vulnerable application is super, super fun, guys. And I highly encourage you to play around with this stuff because you're going to find a lot of cool hidden gems and Easter eggs. For example, here you can see James Bond. My name is Sherlock Holmes. It's my business to know what other people don't know. Very, very fun stuff. You see another line here, Romeo, where art thou, Romeo? And then there's a flag here that you can decode. I'm not going to do this. This should be a fun little challenge for you guys. And then we have something at the bottom. The world isn't run by weapons anymore, or energy or money. It is run by little ones and zeros, little bits of data. It's all about electrons, right? So this is a movie quote, and you guys can leave a comment below and tell me where this line is from, which movie this line is from. All right, so that was just a little bit of a rabbit hole. I'm just going to exit from this, go back here. So again, guys, please make sure you tell me what that line is from. Okay, so here we have our notes and we ran our first tool. So I'm just going to show you another tool that we can use. Again, I'm going to be showing you the same thing, but using different tools. And this is going to be very important because basically, the more tools you have, the more diverse you are as an attacker, as an auditor, as a defender. And different tools will give you different output. And you might have certain scenarios where a certain tool fails for whatever reason. So having multiple tools in your tool belt is going to be very, very important in your skill set. So earlier I showed you Dasach. I'm going to show you another one. So another one is called GoBuster. I don't have GoBuster. How comes? So you can easily do sudo apt search GoBuster. Yeah, you can go and then install it. It does the same thing as well. I'm not going to install it because of time. Another tool that you can use is called Ferox Buster. So this is one of my favorite tools. It's written in Rust. GoBuster is written in Go. And the thing about this is it's very fast and it's recursive by nature. Right? The fact that it's built in Rust means that it's super, super fast. And you need to be careful if you're running this on a live environment. It can easily DOS an application that is not well configured. So you have to be very, very careful when you're using this tool. It's super fast and it can easily DOS because it's multi-threaded by nature. Right? So let's see how it works. So Ferox Buster. Again, I'm just going to give the URL HTTP localhost. Again, it has its own built-in list. So you can see at the top, this is the checklist. It's going to use the Raft medium directories. And you can see how fast it is. Within seconds, it's already found a bunch of stuff and it's actually already finished, right? So you can just see how fast it was if you compare with the other Dart which was written in Python. Okay. So we can see here, didn't find too much. The same stuff, reports, docs, references, contact us. Yeah, so let's see if we can just run this again. And then I'm going to specify downloadable web app. It's case. Again, guys, super, super fast. And you can see it already found it. Again, nothing too interesting here. But you can see, again, having different tools, very, very important, right? So that was a little bit about brute forcing. So let's go back about in particular directory brute forcing. So this is where we were, and then we were able to see that we have this image, right? And this is a URL that we did not see, right, in our output. Let's see if I can go to reports, HTTP underscore or web app. So in our output here, you can see we weren't able to find this, right? So this is an interesting URL. So if I come here and remove this, let's see what is in users. We get a list of users. So let's see whether we can use this. I'm just gonna go back. And then I'm going to create a list. So I'm going to call this users.text. And then you can see I have admin, we have lit, then we have Gordon B, and then we have Pablo, and we have Smith, right? So let's see whether we can find out the other passwords for these users, right? So in the beginning, I'm going to be using a tool called wfuzz. Very, very cool tool. And this what allows us, as the name says, this is a web fuzzer, right? So here we're going to be able to brute force not only just word lists, not only directories, not only passwords, but you can even brute force various parameters. This is a very, very versatile tool, and I highly, highly encourage you to learn it. It has a lot of options, and we're going to walk through how it works, right? So the most important thing here we want is the URL, right? We also want the word list. So you just use /w for the word list. And then we're going to need the cookie. This is going to be very, very important because we'll need to be authenticated. We're going to see that shortly. So let's see how this works. So I'm just going to go back to my BAP suite, and I just want to see the full path. So this is /vulnerabilities, brute, and we have a question mark, our username, and our admin. And then here we have our cookie. And just to make sure that I'm authenticated for the first attempt, so I'm just going to do admin and password. I'm going to log in. Let's refresh this. Already logged in, so I can come here. I'm going to go to my cookie editor, and I just want to copy this. This is the most important thing. I'm just going to copy this value here, and I'm going to paste it in my notes. Notes. And I can say PHP says ID is going to be that. Right? So let's see how we're going to run the first attack. So I'm going to again use wfuzz, right? And then I'm just going to have the help so we can see all the options as we use them. So one thing that I also want to use is colors, right? We love colors so that we can see the output more clearly. So I'm going to use that. And then I'm going to specify the word list. So using /w, and you can see here, this is where we do that. So I'm going to use share set list passwords, and I want to use 500. That's the one I'm going to use. Feel free to use another one. And I'm going to need to specify the cookie, right? And you can see here, if you want to specify the cookie, we can use the -b option, right? So for us to do that, we're going to do it like this. So the cookie, the most important ones are security is equals to low and PHP session ID. So to specify, separate the two cookies using a semicolon. It's going to be important. And then is going to be the value that I copied, right? I'm just going to paste that in. And then I'm going to now pass in the URL. So this is going to be HTTP, going to be localhost, again, not localhost. And then vulnerabilities, if I can type, and then root, and then it's going to specify parameters, username. This is going to be admin, right? So for the first scenario, and then we're going to move on to the other users. And then we're going to specify the password. Now, this is the important part, right? So here, we're going to use the keyword fuzz, right? And you can see here, if you read the documentation here, it's going to tell you that where you want to brute force, the parameter in which you want to brute force, you're going to use the keyword fuzz in capital letter. And you make sure that it's in capital letters. So wfuzz is going to look at this command. It's going to say, okay, I can see you've given me a URL, and the area that you want me to fuzz in this case is the password field. Right? And then lastly, we're going to say login is equals to login, like that. So let's see how this works. All right, so we can see we have a bunch of stuff. You can see how fast this is. You can compare with Intruder. This is super fast. Now we can see we have a lot of responses. So 200, this is good. You can see we have 100 lines, we have 250 words, we have these characters, and this is the payload. So we can come here and check where is password. Cannot see password. Should be somewhere here. So one thing that we can do is we can try and filter anything, for example, that is 250 words. Let's see if that works, right? So going back to my options, you can see this is how we can filter out our response, because we don't want to see all this output. We just want to see what matters to us. We can see here we can filter by the status code here. So for example, here, if you have different status codes, you can do that. You can filter by lines, so this column here, the words and characters. So in this case, I'm going to try using the words. So for us to do that, it's going to be -HW, right? So I'm going to edit my command here, and then I'm just going to come here, and I want to do --HW, and I think that was 250, right? So 250. So again, immediately you can see we were able to find our password. And you can see it just took 4 seconds. Super, super fast. And we're able to do 500 requests, right? And you're doing 100 requests per second. So you can see how powerful this tool is, right? Again, the command here is wfuzz. We say we want to filter by the number of words. So in this case, only the correct word had 254 words instead of 240. You see we want colors, because colors are always nice. And then specify the word list here. You specify the cookie. In this case, the most important one is security. Again, in real life, you really want to play around with all these cookies, see which ones are important. Again, sorry, the HTTP parameters in the real world. And again, you can always fuzz any of these parameters. That is the beauty of WFuzz. And so we can see we've been able to get that password, and it was very, very easy. So now the question is, all right, so now we know the admin, right? That's cool. But what about the other users? Let's see how we can do that. So again, here I have my list of users. So we have admin, we already know that. We have lead, Gordon B, Pablo, and Smithy. So how can we modify our request so that we are able to brute force both usernames and passwords? So let's see how we can do that. Okay, so I'm just going to be using the same command. So I'm just going to copy this for reference. And then I'm going to go back to my notes. Again, guys, please take good notes. So we can see brute forcing single user, right? You can see this is a command that good. Great. So at least I have them in my notes so that later on when I'm revising, I know what to look for. All right, so let's see how we can modify this request. So for us to do that, it's very, very simple. So I'm just going to cycle up. Then I'm going to go here at the top. And instead of using W, I'm going to use the option Z. So you can see here on the word list, Z allows us to specify a payload for different parameters. You can see here. So the way the command is, so I'm going to use colors, and then I'm going to specify, it's going to come back here, so Z, and then I want to give it the file. So I'm going to start off with the username list. So, and another important thing here is to note is between the keyword file and the word list you're going to use, make sure there's no space. So users.txt, I think that was it. So sure, check. Yes, it was users. Yeah. So users, all right. That's going to be the first, it's going to be my first word list, right? And then I'm going to do -z again, and then file, then comma. Again, make sure there's no space between those two. And then I'm going to come here to the end. Now, this is the interesting part. Remember in our previous request, we specified the keyword fuzz. So here we're going to do the same thing, but we need to tell it, okay, which word list do I use on which parameter? So in this case, for the admin, or rather for the username, I'm going to use the keyword fuzz. And then for this other parameter, I'm going to use fuzz2. So fuz2z. So that is how it wants you to do it. And if you check here, you can see it tells you here, this is how you want to specify it. So the first parameter is going to be fuzz. Second one is going to fuzz2. The other one fuzz3, etc., etc. So this is how you're going to do it. So it's going to take the first, word list, place it here, and it's going to take the second one here, and then place it here. I hope that makes sense. And then it's gonna run this. So right now I'm filtering by, so initially let me just remove this so that we can see the requests as they come. Boom, and you can see how it is. So we can see it's trying admin and all these different types of parameters. So let's try and see whether we can now filter based on those word lists again, based on rather the words. I'm going to come here, go back here, Then I'm going to add --HW, and let's just try the previous one. So you're going to filter by words, and in this case, the length of 250. So we can see it found admin straight away. You can see it also found Gordon, you can see Pablo, and lastly Smith. And for some reason, it was not able to find Lit, right? So let's see whether we can save this. So this is the output. So what I can do is I can just do echo. I'm going to copy this one by one. We already know admin, so I'm not going to copy that. And then we just want to echo this into, let's call this creds.txt. And then I'm going to copy this again. Cool. Paste that. Creds. Notice I'm using the double arrow so that I append, not overwrite. And creds. And then lastly, Smithy. Great. So now we have a nice list of our usernames, right? So that is how we can get our usernames. And for the people who are watching here who are also hackers like me, I know they're wondering, Vic, why are you not using FAF instead? So don't worry, I got you guys covered. Another tool that we can do the same thing is called FAF, right? It's just as good as WFuzz, and it's a tool that came just after WFuzz. Again, it does the exact same stuff. It's just that it has a very interesting name, fast, faster, useful, right? So let's see how we can use FAF for the same stuff. Again, I'm just going to keep this here, but most of the parameters are generally the same. So FFUF, and then we're going to use, in this case, the syntax is slightly a bit different. So we're going to say we're going to use this as a username. In this case, if you the difference between FAF and FAS is in the way it specifies the different payload positions. So we're going to use FAS. The good thing here is we can use any name. We're not restricted like in WFuzz where you have to use the keyword fuzz in uppercase or it doesn't work. So here it can be anything. I'm just going to use fuzz here. And then for the other word list, by user share secrets passwords 500 worst. And then here I can use any name. So I'm going to use summit for this presentation. So we're going to see how that's going to play in later on. And then again, here we specify the cookie with /b. It's going to be security is equals to low. And PHP session ID is equals to, oops, that's not it. I'm going to cut my notes, copy this, paste that, close this. Again, guys, you can see why it's important to have notes. And then lastly, we're going to specify the URL, right? So HTTP localhost slash vulnerabilities. Then it's going to be root slash question mark is the name. So remember, so this is where we are going to specify our keyword. In this case, we used fuzz like that. And then specify the password. And remember, I used summit, so I'm going to use here summit. Right. And then lastly, the login. Right. So let's see if this works. You can see it works. I'm just going to stop this again. You can see it's super, super fast, just like W fuzz. And so this way, this time around, let's do something different. So rather than filtering on words, let's see if we can filter on the size. Right? So I'm just going to look at the documentation here. So this is how you filter. Again, you can filter on codes, length, and all these different things. So what I want to do is filter on words. So here, FW. So I'm going to come here, just this to the top, come here to the beginning, and I'm going to use dash dash FW. I forgot what was the size. Let me just run this again. So this is 175 words. So let's just use that. It's 175. Let's clear this. Home, and then dash dash FW 175. You can see it's still able to do the exact same thing. You can see admin password, Pablo let me in, Gordon, and Smithy. You can see super, super fast, right? Okay, so I think that was a very good demonstration on how to brute force both using Suite and on the terminal. The next thing is I want us to now move to the next level. So that was a low security level. So what we want to do here is we're going to go back here to security, and let's take this up a notch. Let's take this up a notch. So I'm going to come here and submit, and then go back to my application. And it's always good to refresh your cookies so you can get fresh cookies. Again, I'm going to come here, and then I'm going to try this again. Admin password. And if we come back here, if I can go back to our target, we can see here, this is a fresh request. And the difference here, you can see here, let me send this to repeater so it's clearer for you guys. You can see here that the security now is set to medium, right? So we're just going to do the same thing again. I'm going to take this, send to intruder, right? So here we are. Again, I'm going to select password. I'm going to add that. And then I'm going to go to my payloads. Again, it's going to use a simple list. Come back here. I'm going to save that. Then I want to go to my settings. I'm going to do the same grep match. I'm just going to clear this. And I'm just going to add, in this case, incorrect. Right. So I want it to filter on that one. Then I just want to now start this attack. Let's see how it's going to behave. And basically now it's going to go a lot slower. You're going to see it gets to a point and it becomes super, super slow, super slow. And basically what you're doing here is we have a very basic and primitive way of what we call rate limiting. So we've looked at how to defend, rather how to attack. So how do we defend? We implement rate limiting. And then you might be thinking, why don't I just block this offending IP? Yeah, you could do that, but you also run the risk of blocking a legitimate user. So maybe this is a legitimate user that was compromised and his or her machine is being used for furthering attacks. If you just outrightly block someone, then you might lose on a potential customer, right? So the first thing that we want to do is we want to implement some form of rate limiting. We can say, hey, once you see, for example, more than 50 requests coming from a single IP address, we are going to throttle you. So every subsequent request is going to take longer and longer and longer. And then maybe after a certain period, if you still continue offending, then we can block you. Right. So we can see that was very slow. I'm going to stop this again. You can see I was still able to brute force, and we were able to see that the password again, in this case, is the one without the incorrect parameter. So it still works. So slightly better, but not so good. So let's see how different this looks like. So I'm just going to cycle up here, and I'm going to go back to W fuzz. I don't know why I like it. Yeah, so this it is. Then the only thing that I'm going to change is this cookie parameter here. And I'm going to change this to medium, like that. And it's going to take slightly longer. It's going to wait on this. While that runs, I just confirm whether my cookie is the same. Cookie editor. So dfh9 is my cookie dfh9. So cookie hasn't changed. Oh, don't know why double fuzz is taking too long. It's going to stop that request. Let me see whether WFAS is going to do the same. So rather FAF. There's some medium. So you can see it's taking subsequently much slower than before, right? Remember, it was taking, was it 4 seconds before? And this one is, oh, funny enough, it did not get. Let's see why that's not happening. So I'm just going to go back to my burp and see what could have changed. So this is my request here. Again, we have the security set to medium. Might be a caching issue. Just let me try this again. Let me see what errors I'm getting. Just give it a couple more seconds to see the responses that I'm getting. So I'm just going to refresh this site. My container is not up. Let me just check that. You can see it's still up. It's still okay. Let me see if I can just do a hard refresh. So let me see if my cookie has changed. So the security low, I think that's the issue. So I'm just going to come back here and submit. Yeah. So now, yeah, now it's been set to medium. Let me see if that's going to work. Let me first stop hiding the words. See if we can just get the requests without hiding. So essentially, I think my machine is hanging. I don't know why. Oh, good. So here it is. And you can see it's much, much, much slower. It's much, much slower. Remember, it was taking just a couple of seconds, 4 seconds, I think. You can see now this is way, way slower. We are still able to brute force, but yeah, if you're an impatient hacker, this might what stop you, right? So I'm going to stop this, and then I'm going to go back here and add the same way. It was hide words, yeah, hide words 250. Let's see whether we can do the same stuff. Again, this is going to take so much, much slower, but we are still going to be able to get the same output. So that's how we're going to do it. Again, this is going to take so much long, so please just let me stop this because of time, but you get the idea. It's going to work. So the other thing is we can change this now to medium, sorry, rather high. I'm going to submit this and see how much different this is. Right, so you can see it's been set to high, and I'm going to come here, I'm going to do the same stuff. So admin password, and you can see we get here. If I put something that is wrong, I'm going to put test. So in this case, you can see saying username is wrong. I don't know, it's changing the security level to low. Let's go back here, submit this. Okay, now it's high again. Let's refresh this. High. Pause. Login again. Set to high. Yeah, I blame the demo gods. I don't know why it doesn't want to change here. Submit. Come on, let's do this. I know you can change. Okay, so for some reason it does not want us to do that. But so here, this is what I promised before. This is basically the source code of the application. Again, this is very, 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 very simple. You can see it's checking whether you've clicked the login button. So it's going to take your username, it's going to take your password, then it's going to compute an MD5 hash. Again, this is not secure. Then it's just going to run a raw SQL statement. Again, this is very, very insecure. This is vulnerable to SQL injection, but we're going to ignore that for now. And you can see here there's no brute force protection. So just going to check the password, and if you log in successfully, it tells you welcome, and then this is incorrect. So let's compare all the different other levels so we can see how do we implement security on this end. So we're going to go from the bottom. So again, this is where we had zero security at all, right? So we were able to brute force as much as we like. But when you get to medium, we're going to see something interesting here. So here, when we get to the place where the login has failed, we're going to have a sleep command. So before it allows you to try again, it's going to wait for 2 seconds before it gives you a chance to do that. So this is a very naive implementation of how to implement trick limiting from the source code point of view. So moving on to high, we can see here the difference here is we have what we call a anti-CSRF token. And CSRF is basically cross-site request forgery. And having this token basically prevents us from doing multiple replay attacks. So what it's going to do is, alongside checking your username and password, it's going to check this session variable to see whether it is valid. And if it is not valid, then it's not going to allow you. So you can just Google here CSRF. See, you can see this is the cross-site request forgery. And using this token here, we can be sure that using this token here, we can be sure that our requests can be sort of throttled. Again here, we are also having some sort of random sleep message. So it's going to take a value between 0 and 3, and it's going to sleep based on that. And why this is important is it's going to allow us to prevent what you call blind attacks, right? Now, for example, we might have like an SQL injection attack, and if you are only sleeping using a constant rate, then an attacker might infer that and may be able to extract some information based on the fact that this value never changes here. Now, this is a slightly better way of doing it, but there's still ways of getting around that. So one way that you can do this is to create a script that is going to basically extract the CSRF token and then place it for all subsequent parameters. I will have shown that, but I am short of time. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to show you the script, a sample script that you can play around with. So I'm just going to copy this was just a sample script that I was playing around with. And it basically uses the request method in Python and Beautiful Soup to go and extract the session token. I will have written this, but I see I'm out of time with you guys. But so that's one way you can do that. Another thing that we could have done rather, is just show you this. Situations. Copy this. So what I have here, this is just a basic bash script that is going to use the host's IP tables. So IP tables, if you're not familiar with it, this is a mechanism for you. It's basically the host-based firewall, right? And we can use this to implement throttling, in this case, using IP tables. So here you can see we can set up the maximum number of connections. So in this case, this is 50. And we want to throttle you for this amount of seconds. And if you persist, then we're going to block you for 60 seconds. So these are the parameters that I'm going to use. Again, you can play around with these values. Next, we're going to create a new chain. IP tables works with the concept of chains. And then we're going to add a couple of rules to it, right? So here we're setting up the maximum number of connections per second. And then if it gets past that, we just want to drop, right? And then we're going to apply this to port 80 because that's where our web browser is. And we want to throttle this request, right? And if you go past if you persist, then we're just going to block you for 60 seconds. So I have this quick script here, and I'm just going to make it executable plus X. And then I can just do sudo. So now, if I can check my IP tables, so IP tables, I'm going to run this sudo. You can see that I have a new chain here called test, right? And you can see it has been configured with all of our parameters, right? So let's test this. So I'm going to use Ferox Buster. So right now we can see if I go to, let's close this as well. So if I come back to my application, right, I can log in, no problem. I can access the website, right? So let me see whether I can trigger that rate limiting. So Ferox Buster -W. I'm going to use a slightly larger word list so that I can trigger that rule. So use a share word list, and this is going to be ROCU, and then the URL HTTP localhost. So this is going to go ahead and try and brute force. Of course, this being very fast as it is, it's definitely going to hit that limit, and then once I go past that, then I'm going to be rate limited. I'm going to let this run for a while. You can see here I have a bunch of errors. I'm just waiting for the errors to go up. It's coming a bit slower. So you can see the errors are starting to go a bit higher. Here is a method to make it go faster. So Ferox Buster H. I think there's a keyword here. Let me look for it. Resume smart data methods /. So you can see the errors are getting higher. So I think that's when the rate limiting is starting to kick in. So let me see if I can still access this. I can, but it's slightly slower. I can see whether I can make this parallel to make it go faster. So I'm going to play with that. Let me see if there's anything else I can play around with. That's it. Errors are slightly getting higher. You can see how Ferox Buster is really taking a toll on my machine. So much slower. So I'm just going to make this run a bit faster. I'm just going to use the parallel parameter and see. So let's see 5. This up. See to 10. Needs an option. Let's see if it's going to pick it automatically. Quite. Value is required. Parallel scans. Spelling. I know. Spelling is horrible. Parallel. Okay. See, clearly does not want me to use that, so I'm not going to use it for now. So let's see if I'm going to trigger this. Let's give it a couple of times. See if I can kick off multiple Ferox busters. To you, share this, route you, dash you, HTTP, localhost. So this is definitely going to hit that limit. Yeah, and it's completely killed my Kali. So yeah, I think here we've reached the end of this presentation because my Kali is dead. But yeah, that is how we could implement rate limiting using Kali Linux. Right, so where were we? So here we were. So we've seen how we can perform brute forcing. We can see what are the different methodologies that we can use to defend. So we've seen how to implement rate limiting from a source code point of view and also using IP tables. Next thing that we can also do is create what you call an account lockout policy. So we can say if for this particular accounts, if you try more than 5 times, then your account is going to be automatically locked. That is going to prevent an account from being taken over. Then lastly, we can have a capture and MFA, and I'm sure we've also seen that. MFA is able to introduce another factor so that you're not just using passwords, but maybe a one-time token, time-based one-time token, right? So those are the 3 ways that we can defend against. brute forcing. Obviously, when you're doing these things, I cannot stress how important it is for us to be ethical. Always make sure that you're testing on applications that you have permission. Make sure that if it's an application that you don't own, you have prior written consent from the owner, right? So again, this is a continuous process. You need to identify vulnerabilities, implement countermeasures, as discussed before, and continuously improve, continuously learn, because as you've seen earlier, the threat landscape is continuously evolving, and we need to make sure that our skills are top notch. Right, so that's it for my presentation today. We've looked at some common vulnerabilities. We've looked at what is brute forcing. We looked at some of the tools that are used by professionals for testing web applications. And we've seen how we can protect our systems and users. We used the damn vulnerable web application for our case to create this local environment where we can play around and test with these different vulnerabilities. And like I mentioned, this was just scratching the surface. There's so many other vulnerabilities that we didn't get a chance to talk about and play with. That's my challenge to you. Go out there, play around with these tools, and if you're able to do it, please hit me up on my LinkedIn. I'd love to see what you guys come up with. Again, remember, please do all these things in an ethical manner and continue learning. Right. That's it for me. Thank you for listening to me, and I hope you learned something. So back to you, Morage.
Well, I will say that last comment sounded like the Bible part where Jesus says to his disciple, I go into the world and spread the gospel. So I think we will take that advice and definitely look more into it and get to learn even more. I believe you've been following with us for the last 2 hours. I believe the session was, I know the session was engaging and interactive, and let me see. For me, what stood out was the sarcasm, especially when we got to that those sarcastic comments about James Bond, where they had a script from a line from a movie actually, and I know I've seen that snippet. I think most of you, if you've gone to YouTube, you've come across such a shot where it mentioned such a line. So at this point in junction, we wish to ask, probably if you have any questions, you can just type them on the comment section. And yeah, before we end the session, we are leaving the floor open to any questions. And I believe I can just put Victor Muriithi's LinkedIn here in our chat. Let me trace it. Just give me a minute. And you can engage him. You can text him on LinkedIn. You can follow him to see the milestones he has passed or the experience he has in this field. And definitely and surely, I think you can come to maybe even he can be your mentor. For me, I might consider him a mentor if I am venturing into such a space, because he has the experience, he has the expertise, and he has gone through the obstacles and then the hurdles, so he knows where to start and he has the map. So feel free to reach out to him. Yeah, just a minute, taking a moment to load. As I try and locate the link for his LinkedIn account, you can just ask any questions you might have. Probably for me, I would ask the question that if you used Kali Linux, and is it probably the only software we can use with such an app aside such as Docker, or can we even use like Windows? Because I know mostly people use Linux for such what would I say, such professions. But on your end, Victor, what might you say? Is it a must use Kali Linux, or can we use other softwares, OSs?
That's a great question. Thank you, Morage. This is what I would say. Initially, Docker used to be was natively created for Linux, but over the years, it has obviously been ported to other operating systems. So you can definitely play around it with it on Windows. You can check out the Docker documentation. They go through how to install it for different operating systems. The reason why I like Linux is because it's native and it's super easy to work on it. But there's nothing stopping you from venturing to other operating systems. You can use Ubuntu, you can use Fedora. Yeah, it's cross-platform.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Victor. Um, the link is in the chat for Victor Muriithi's LinkedIn account. You can follow him. You can also, reach out to him on a personal level if you wish to further this conversation. It was an interactive session, and this brings us to the end of our first session for today. We are definitely looking forward to seeing you in the afternoon session, which starts right at 2 p.m. So go get your lunch, get a cup of water, and refill. I know Victor told you to get a cup of water and coffee, so you can definitely refill your cup of water and see you in the afternoon session. Kindly tell a friend to tell a friend to join us for the afternoon session using the hashtags African STEM Summit, and you can definitely tag us at Africa STEM Summit. Thank you so much for your time. We appreciate you. See you in the afternoon session. And thank you so much, Victor, for the wonderful insights. I'm definitely looking forward to have a further conversation on this topic.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for the listeners, and see you later on. Bye bye.
Bye bye, sir.